Hi, welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a lovely day no matter what it is you are doing today. So another thing, aside from jewellery, that's really close to my heart is music. So today I wanted to show you a couple of really simple and easily accessible wirework charms that you can use in all kinds of jewellery and decor projects. I'm going to be working with 1mm or 18 gauge raw copper wire. If you're going to be working for earrings, you might take that down to a 0.8mm or a 20 gauge wire because it'll be perfectly strong enough. However, if you're wearing something on the wrist, you might like to consider the slightly stronger 18 gauge or 1mm gauge wire, because it will sort of come into contact with things and you don't want it to get too battered. If you'd like to join me down at the board, I will show you how we can kick off with that. So we're going to be working with, as I say, the 1mm or 18 gauge wire, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of a smooth through. I'm going to show you 3 variations that you can work with today. To begin with, we're going to have a look at the basic kind of note design, or clef if you prefer. And what we're going to start off with is a little bit larger position, a little bit further down from the tip of the round nose pliers. And we're going to start turning a little bit of a loop, but we're going to keep that really quite open, whereas normally we would make quite a tiny aperture there. So I'm going to move then to my flat facing pliers, give that a bit of a squeeze to make sure that the loop does close on itself, or the beginning of the coil closes on itself, but that there is a large central aperture there. So I'm going to continue to allow the wire, which we very gently pre-warmed, to scoop around to the side before starting to bring that back on itself. Once I've applied a little bit of heat through this wire, I'm going to remove to my round nose pliers, and I'm going to take that quite gently to create the start of a loopy shape over the top. I'm just going to take that end and I'm going to post that tail through that central aperture that we made. So once that's in position, you can start to draw that down. You might need to pull with your pliers if you can't get quite a good enough grip. And we're just going to pull that so that it sits through to make the size that you want. You may need to just give that a very gentle squeeze to get the exact shape that you want, and then apply a little bit of warmth and heat to that tail down at the bottom, straightening up at the top, and then there's a little bead coming into play there. We'll look at that in a moment. I'm going to follow the curvature that we've already started to create around, and now we're going to go again quite close to the tip of the pliers this time. And I'm going to start to create that lovely coil design, really smooth and fluid. Just tighten that up slightly, and then again with the flat facing pliers to bring that in. And that is really the simplest, easiest way to make that kind of note or clef design. So if you're making earrings, you'll probably want them to be approximately the same size. So we're going to show you now a slightly different note formation. I had a look at creating a base clef, but because it's got 2 bits that are flying off to the side, I thought that was for another day. That was a bit of a head scratcher. So if you join me back down at the board, I will show you the next segment. So next up, we're going to make one of these pieces, and again we're working with the 1mm or 18 gauge wire, giving that a little bit of warmth, trimming away a short length. The first and second pieces are made with less than 4 inches of that wire. So for this one, you may like to start in the centre to create a little hanging loop at the beginning. So if we find the approximate centre of our piece, as you draw the wires round together, you'll be able to tell whether that was centralised or not. I'm going to shift the grip of those pliers and just put a little loop at the top of a straight line. So if I show you there, you've got a hanging loop at the top. You might like to take slightly longer than I have just to get that nice and flat. Give that a very gentle squeeze and then draw those back into true. Now, dependent on the size, if you're trying to balance quite a large piece, you may like to make the bends further away from the loop, or you may like to put your next bends a little bit closer if you're making a smaller design. So coming in now with some flat pliers, my chain nose pliers in this instance, I'm going to come quite close to the tip of the pliers and push that all the way back so that it goes much further than our traditional 90 degrees. I'm going to estimate the same distance on the other side of that central loop. Just move that out the way. And I'm going to bring that one to less than 90 degrees. What you might wish to do to get a really good sharp bend is to take that past where you want it and then draw it back. You will of course need to just make sure that you re-straighten at those corners, but you'll get a much more angular bend if you do so. And again, with the first bend that we made, if you want to take it further than you need and then draw it back, just so that you can get that lovely sharpness, you can indeed. Now you might like to measure these to make sure that they are identical. I'm not overly going to worry. I'm just going to start coiling up to the right hand side now, at the bottom of both of those. So I want those coils to begin quite tightly, so I'm beginning close to the tip of my round nose pliers, and I'm going to get that to go one and a small amount, and then I'm going to do the exact same on the other side. And this is where being careful with your movements, so I'm just going to switch pliers once now. It can help prevent hand strain if you're doing multiples of these. So I'm going to draw that coil up until I've got 2 full turns. And this again was around about 4 or so inches of wire. If you wish to use a ruler to check that these are the same length, you absolutely may. And you can, of course, play around with those bends to make sure they meet your exact aesthetic ideal. So you might like it to be quite quirky, you might want it to have a slightly shallower position. So those are our first 2 basic designs. What I'm going to show you now is how to add on a bead so that you can create a slightly more embellished note. So we're going to take just ever so slightly more, maybe 4.5 inches or so of the 1mm or 18 gauge wire. This is raw copper that I'm working with today. It's my favourite wire to work with at the moment, although it does make my hands dirty. So putting a great deal of warmth through there. I am going to slide a bead into position. It might decide to slide off the bottom, you never know. It depends how feisty it feels. So we're going to start in much the same way, but I'm going to make that initial loop as large as I possibly can. So I'm going to use the very base of my pliers to create a central aperture there. Give that a bit of a squeeze to get some strength, and then continue as if we were making exactly the same design as we did to begin with, like so. I'm going to take that bead a little bit further along, put some warmth again into that section of the wire, and start drawing that curve around into position. And as we did the first time, taking the wire over the top and through the aperture we created. Now again, you may wish to grab some pliers to draw that tail through, like so. What we're trying to do is allow the bead to sit just inside that aperture. Now if you do mangle the wire slightly, you can give that a straighten out. So I'm just going to give that a bit of a squeeze and make sure that that sits how I want it to. And again, a little bit of a swoosh coming off in this direction before we come in with those round nose pliers. I'm just going to flip that over for a second as it's easier for me. Quite close to the tip. Again, we're creating quite a neat and small coil. Get that going before switching to my flat facing bent chain nose pliers. So there you have the embellished version of that note. You can open that out if you prefer, but again, if you're working at the ears, you can work slightly more fancifully because it's less likely to get involved in heavy duty impact. So there you have your 3 basic musical note designs. I'm going to show you now with some bolt ring clasps how you can very easily integrate that into a charm bracelet. I'll show you the bracelet first. So here's one that I was just messing around with earlier, and because I wanted to have those 3 example pieces, so I've got the plain note, I've got the embellished note, and I have got the smaller of the musical notes. What I have done is I have gone for a 3-2-3 variation of beads. So we've got 3, then 2, 3, then 2, 3, then 2. And what that gives us is the opportunity to add a charm between the double bead stations. So I have here some complementary colour bolt ring clasps with an open jump ring attached. What I'm going to do is just attach that to the top of each of those charms, just closing up the jump ring so that the 2 ends meet neatly. You can take it slightly past and then allow that to sit. Give that a bit of a squeeze And then you can simply attach that where you see fit. So I'm going to attach one of these charms in each of those positions where I have allowed 2 beads rather than 3 beads. And in that way you can give a sense of repetition, which is lovely, I think, in charm designs. So this one has decided to go slightly flighty, so I'm just going to pop that into position, bring in another pair of pliers and close my jump ring. So with the jump rings, you're always kind of opening and closing them as if they're a door. You never open them outwards, like so. And then we're going to take that jump ring, bolt ring clasp, and we're going to make sure that's facing in the correct orientation for our charm. Find the space on the bracelet and slip that into position. And then we're going to add the last one. So again, very carefully with our jump rings, just to make sure that we don't bend them out of shape when we open and close them. We want there to be no space between that closure. You can give it a very gentle squeeze if you wish. Make sure that that's sitting in the correct orientation for you. And then we're going to add that on into position. So if we have a look at that musical charm bracelet, I think probably I would swap these ones over so that the largest dangling charm was in the centre and then 2 more equally sized ones either side. I've got some practice pieces here, so I might even put the super small one, if I flip that over, I might even put the super small one on. And you can play around, as I say, there's multiple variations here. Done a couple of pieces with crystals. This is with a lovely white Swarovski bicone crystal. There's another piece here with one of the agates, so you could play around with that exactly how you see fit. And just making sure that they sit how you want them to. And if you're unhappy with the swooshes, how they sit, you can obviously moderate that slightly because we always warm the wire before we use it. So there's lots of ways that you can use these. So they make perfect charms to wear at the wrist. They're really, really cute in earrings. What's lovely is if you have multiple ear piercings, you can kind of mess around with how they look and make your ear into a musical bar. Obviously don't do that in real life, but you could go for that kind of effect, especially if you're wearing hair up or you have a lovely cropped elfin cut, something along those lines. It can be really effective. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Don't forget to join me every other Monday over on Facebook for my Facebook Live event, where I bring you crystals and rocks and tumblestones and carvings and all sorts of shenanigans and fun. It's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for your company. I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.